Chapter 12. Late. Valyn watched the last slivers of sunlight fade from her doorway, the sky that had been warm now turning cold. She sat with her elbows propped on her knees, chin resting on her hands, and cheeks flushed with anticipation. The moon was turning brighter by the second, just a crescent of silver upon a sky that seemed so much more vast to her now. She thought of all the things she could do for Asta, the life that awaited the both of them from that day onward. She wished time would pass faster. But as the minutes seemed to stretch, the stars beginning to blink into view, and Valyn felt a prickle of anxiety. Sunset, Asta had said. She had promised to be back by then, and yet the night sounds of the forest slowly began, a concert of crickets and owls echoing around Valyn, but not quite reaching her ears. She could not listen past the beating of her heart growing louder and louder. The woman rationalized, telling herself that Asta was just running late, and that at any moment she would see starlight hair to match the sky nearing her. She smiled at the thought. But the hour grew late, and Valyn began to panic. She rose to her feet and snatched her cloak, dagger, and boots, assembling them as quickly as her shaking hands could manage. The feeling of dread swelled in her chest, despite her efforts to calm it. The voices were not helping as they egged her on, whispering to her, though there were no words to make out, only eerie hisses. She pushed them down as best as she could, but it had never been her strong suit, so they merely continued as she shut the door behind herself. The walk to the village was quiet for a time, the woods dark and shadowed by scarce moonlight and thick greenery. The familiarity of her home faded the closer she got, and the nearer she walked, the faster her uneasiness festered. She was thinking up any number of reasons for Asta's lateness, but all thoughts faltered as the sounds of the townspeople reached her. She had only been there at night one time before, but the sounds of a large crowd were clearly out of place. She broke through the trees and saw torches glowing all around, alighting the surrounding buildings and streets. There were no wandering humans, no elves out for trading, not even a dog begging for scraps. Valyn could not see any living soul, but she heard them. Valyn began to make her way towards the center of the town, her steps light and soft, though she thought anyone may hear her heart beating in her chest as the sound hammered in her own ears. As she flattened herself against a stone building just behind the gathered crowd, she dared to take a moment to breathe. It caught in her throat the moment she heard a booming voice cut through the chatter. "Here stands the accused. Come, come. Do not be shy, girl." Valyn peeked from around the corner of her hiding spot, and her blood ran cold. There was Asta, lovely, shining Asta, barefoot and bleeding. She was upon a raised wooden platform being held up by guards in full metal armor as a human man with a lavish outfit stood at the center. Asta's head was downcast, her starlight hair cascading down her face, its usual smoothness and luster now dull and tangled. Her usual upper layers of clothing were stripped down to a single white shirt, and Valyn could see red just reaching to her sides and shoulders. Her feet were pooling blood beneath her, and her skirt was covered in dust as though she had been dragged upon the ground. "This elf," began the man at the center, "conspired to murder the royal family. She had been in custody, but due to the sly nature of her people, she escaped the grasp of punishment. No longer will she evade justice." Valyn's mind was reeling, her thoughts spinning in circles so fast she could not keep up. Asta did not care enough about the royal family to orchestrate their deaths. How could she, with them locked in their towers for years? "No!" a voice cried in the crowd. An older elven man began to push through the gathered humans, and the man upon the stage sneered down at him. "You question the truth?" The elf trembled as he looked up, his voice loud but afraid. "I told you before. She means no ill towards the royal family. The poison was meant for the devil in the forest. You must find it and kill it before we all meet our end." Valyn began to shake. The human man scoffed, his hand signaling for a guard to whisk the old elf away. We will deal with the villain in due time, if it even exists. This girl before us must face the law, decreed by the king himself. The elf struggled against the guard who pulled him back through the crowd, his words sweeping over the quiet whispers surrounding him. She must be kept alive. She knows the location of the devil. Ask Gideon. Gideon! Another elf materialized from the sea of people, and Valyn knew his face. It was the same elven man she had questioned about Asta's location the first time she had ventured into town. He speaks true, Gideon said, addressing the attendant towering above him. I have seen the monster that lives in the woods, felt her blade upon my skin, heard her voice hunger for blood. Asta knows. She told me so. For the first time, Asta showed signs of life as she lifted her head. Her eyes were gleaming with tears, and though it seemed to take a great deal of effort, she spoke. He lies, she rasped. I take my punishment. Gideon reeled back at her words, his brow creasing in frustration. I saw her. You told me you were leaving the troop, and when I asked why, you said you had some lover in the woods. Who else could it be but the devil? The crowd began to murmur to each other, but Asta spoke again, silencing them. I lied, she said, her head sinking down again. There is no one in the woods. Aha! Crowed the man on stage. She admits it. Begone now before I call yet another guard to drag you people away. The old elven man disappeared from Valyn's view, but before Gideon moved, he made one more plea. Didn't you see we punished her already? Her involvement with the devil was beaten out of her. We made sure. Why else would we discipline one of our own? Valyn felt hatred, scalding hot inside her. The troop had caused Asta harm because of her, and yet Asta had taken it all, just for more time together. She had promised Valyn a future, and gone back to say her goodbyes, despite the pain they had inflicted. Valyn couldn't stand it. The poison meant for her, the beatings she should have taken instead. Everything rose higher within her, and the voices lapped it up gleefully. She did not stop them. The man on stage sighed. Take him away. I have no use for myths, for she will not escape her fate regardless. So decrees the king. Gideon did not struggle as another guard whisked him away. Valyn's eyes rested on Asta again, her feet frozen in place as she felt only fear and anger. She no longer heard the words spilling from the attendant's voice, the sound muffled as if she were underwater. Her breaths were heavy and ragged as she watched a wooden stump be placed upon the center of the platform, and a man with a large sword stood beside it. The two guards holding Asta up dragged her to it and forced her to her knees. And whatever had frozen Valyn snapped. She stepped out from her hiding spot, and as if Asta sensed it, she lifted her head to gaze out on the crowd. When Valyn dropped the hood of her cloak, Asta's pale eyes found her instantly. At first, Asta smiled, a sadness beyond words etched into her lips, but in a moment, her face turned grave. Her lips parted, and her words came out in a yell that snapped all the heads gathered there to her. No, they do not know what they've done. They do not know the consequences. You must not become the devil they scorn you to be. Please. But oh, how she wanted nothing more. She felt it from the top of her head to the tips of her toes, an all-encompassing power that felt like being burned alive, and like being in Asta's embrace, all at the same time. She just barely registered that her feet no longer touched the ground, that everyone was now far below her, as they gaped at the golden being above them. The voices within her head erupted in ecstasy, and they begged her for blood. She no longer had thoughts of her own. There was no more pain, no more loneliness, only hunger. There were no faces down below, no humans or elves, just ants, like all those years ago. The difference now was that she no longer favored fire. Instead, she yearned to feel it all with her own hands, to douse herself in the last of their fleeting lives. No longer did she have mortal desires. There were only the voices. She was them and they were her. One single entity that knew only one thing: hunger. Nothing else mattered, and there was not a force in existence that was their equal. In the last coherent thought she could register, Valyn heard only the magic whisper to her sweetly, and she listened with bated breath. "Dance," they said. "Dance in blood and gore and let it rot under your feet." And she had no mind left to deny them.